I have finished quilting everything but the last few inches, and then what I'll do is see if I can't start putting the binding on and how that goes. So let's see what happens. I'm going to be putting the finishing touches on this last little bit of the quilt, and then we'll start sewing on the binding. Make sure you're always careful around the needle on a long arm. You really don't want to ever get that in your finger. I've done it once and I will never ever forget it. I come near the edge. In fact, I want to make sure that I get very close to the edge. I better go back this way. I'm not close enough to the edge, and I don't want it to roll up as I'm trying to sew the binding on. Even if it's just a little line, just to keep that edge down. Alright. Now I don't mind breaking the thread right there because it's on the edge, so that's not a problem. From time to time, check your thread cutter on any machine you have one on, because you want to make sure that it doesn't have threads caught up in it that will cause it to not be able to cut efficiently the first time. So if you notice you have to push the button a couple times, it's time to lift off that throat plate and get out your bobbin case. Look carefully around that thread cutter mechanism. I've had threads bunched up in there that prevented it from working properly. And you can quilt right over the little tacks from the tack gun. It rarely ever sews into them, and even if it does that, you can cut it out. But I like putting the tacks anywhere I was having some fullness I needed to get under control. Alright. The only thing I don't like about the tacks is I end up with them on the floor. But I keep a dust mop handy and sweep them up. I don't want my chair to run over them and mess up my wood floor. Okay, I am going to sew the binding on while it's on the frame. I am so excited about this. This should make things a lot easier. Because I hate pulling and pushing this through a regular domestic machine. So I start in the middle and work my way out, trying to stay about 1/4 of an inch away from the end. And if I mess up, I just go back over it again. Alright, I can see I need to take off my stabilizer down here so that I can round this corner. So, I'm going to head down to the end, stop 1/4 of an inch away. I'm going to go ahead and cut so I can get the machine out of my way. Then I'm going to take and fold it back, fold it down, pull this out of the way, and here we go. Let's see. Staying about 1/4 of an inch away. Let's see how I do. And you know what? It's not as hard as I thought it would be. It's not as hard at all. Alright, that's about as far as I can go right now on that side. I don't have the quilt all the way rolled forward. So, let's see if you can see what I'm doing. This is kind of fun. This is not nearly as hard. When I get to the corner, that's the important part. Alright. And if I'm concerned at all about where I'm stitching, if I'm still in the right place, which I started to go offline, then just stop, line it back up, make sure I'm happy, and off I go. I am not trying to be fast here. I'm trying to get the feel of doing this since I've never done this before. Pretty brave doing this in front of y'all, aren't I? coming along pretty good. Trying to use my other hand. I'm not really good at using the machine with my right hand. Very dominant left. So I keep on, see how I'm coming down right around 1/4 of an inch. I don't have to be perfect. I have got a 2.5 inch quarter. I'm gonna stop. Okay, stop 1/4 of an inch before the edge. Okay, but I'm gonna cut it so I can get the machine out of the way. But I stop 1/4 of an inch here. See this? Okay, so this is how you make a mitered binding corner. I'm sure many of you have done it this way. You stop the thread 1/4 of an inch before the edge. Then you fold it back even with the edge. Then you fold it down to run the new direction. So you've got a 45-degree angle right here. Okay? You see that? Now, to get ready to sew, you can't sew it like that. So you pull this excess up, leaving this piece right in place. And you get it out of the way of the needle. And I'm going to come in right off the corner. I'm going to come in right off this corner at a 45-degree angle and then start going down. All right. Let's see. Get my machine in place. And this is where I need to be real careful with my fingers because I'm not used to stitching with my right hand. So let's see how I do. Whoops. That means I forgot to drop my I forgot to drop the presser foot. So let's start again, okay? All right. Come in off that corner to 45-degree angle. All right. Now my foot went underneath, so let me get that out. Okay, here we go. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and keep sewing with my left hand so my right hand can hold this fabric in place. That's what feels comfortable right now. All right, here we go. And I just go along stitching this about 1/4 of an inch from the edge. I'm coming back because I think I got a little more than 1/4 of an inch. I'm coming back. Now I'm going to roll my quilt forward so I can stitch some more. Okay, I'm back to stitching down the side. So now here I go. Stitching the binding down this side, making sure I'm staying at 1/4 of an inch. Down as far as I can go. So this looks like it's going to be pretty easy. I don't know if you need to watch me do the whole thing. I tell you what, the next time I'll tape the end when I have it fully rolled back this way where I join the ends. All right. I'm now going to sew down this far side. It's so much easier than I thought, I have to tell you. It's really nice. Now I have to roll the quilt forward more. I like the top stitch because it has a longer needle glide area, recessed area, so your thread's less likely to get tattered as it goes in and out of the fabric at high speeds that you use for quilting. I like these very much. Okay, that bar is free. this bar has been cut free. Okay, to roll the quilt up, I've loosened my handles, the knobs, so that I can roll the quilt, and I roll it backwards because I'm putting on the binding, not doing normal quilting. Stretched out over the back bar. And then I'm just going to put the clip on the very edge. I don't want it banging on my machine, but it will help just kind of hold this part of the quilt steady. I'm at the end of the quilt. I've done the binding up each side, and I've come across the top like this, and I wanted to show you the last few minutes of what I did. I just come along again, 1/4 of an inch away. Anytime I get off track, I just backtrack and sew it again. I figured as long as it's within the seam allowance, it won't show. If it's over, I'll just take the extra stitches out. I've left the extras here, and I've decided that I will do this on my domestic machine, because you know how you take it and you lay the pieces at angles so that you can get a nice diagonal seam to spread the extra out, but I'm going to do that by my domestic machine. So I will stop at this point on this piece, and I'm going to do a locking stitch just so that it holds it. Oops, now see I've creeped in too much, so let me back this up. Stay a little closer to the edge, and I can take those stitches out later when I'm getting ready to slip stitch it. Do a locking stitch. I'm going to pin these so they won't get in the way when I'm doing the trimming. Normally I trim from the other direction, so I think I am going to roll it back, because when you trim you want to get it nice and even. If I trim this off right now, then it'll be very hard to trim the sides, and I do like trimming it on the machine because it's nice and square and taut on the machine, and I can get a nice quick cut of it. So I'm going to get the machine out of the way, re-roll it, which only takes a moment. There we go. Re-roll it, which only takes a moment, and then start my cutting. I'll be back. That took exactly 2 minutes to roll. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut along here, cutting right at the edge of the quilt. And I'm very careful to make sure I get all the layers and don't cut anything wrong. But do you see how much easier this is than having the quilt? I guess I could lay it on a table and it would be pretty easy. But cutting it in your lap could create all kinds of problems. And I'm cutting it off, and then this will just wrap around the edge like that. You always want a full seam in your binding, so that's why I cut it even with the edges of the fabric. If I cut it too short, it wouldn't give a nice full edge, and that is not what good quilts and good quilters want. All right. So now that I've cut it loose, and my batting, here's my batting because it floats, so I'll cut that off. Now I'm going to take the quilt lay it right here and start trimming it up each side. And like I said, very carefully cutting it even with the quilt fabric all the way up. I used to have electric scissors and they sure were nice. They had a battery charger, and this would make this very easy, but unfortunately after 10 years it gave up the ghost. But do you see how easy this is to trim while on the frame? It always surprises me when people don't want their long arm quilter to trim their quilt for them. 'Cause, boy, that's a step I don't mind skipping. I'm an odd quilter, and because I love the process of slip stitching the binding. I have a friend, Ann, who loves to take hers on car trips to do. Slip stitching the binding, to me, is a very peaceful and restful process. So I'm just going to keep trimming all the way down. Now, I haven't finished trimming the other side, so I don't want to trim it all the way off yet until I get the entire side done. I'll be right back. I'm ready to do the last little bit of trimming. I've just about finished. And just so you know, I save my scraps of fabric from the backing, and I also save my batting because it's great for stuffing pillows, or sometimes if I'm doing a small little wall quilt, I'll piece my batting strips together for that. Alright, so the last few inches of cut, and then I've given birth to a complete quilt. Yay! A quilt is born! I thought I would show you what it looks like hanging there. Do you see the big soft flowers? Once the tension's off the quilt, it's always exciting because then you can see the actual design. I'm going to advance it here. Oh, look at those flowers! They are so happy. I love it. Thank you for whoever did that magazine article that I got the idea from. That's what I love about modern media. Between the internet and magazines, there are plenty of inspirations out there. And I want to tell you something else. Right here, it might look a little funny right now, but I realized when I got the quilt together that this block and this block had the same fabric. And I really didn't want, remember I put them together on the diagonal, so I didn't realize until it was up and down. And I happened to be looking at the film. But sometimes, I tell you what, take a picture of your quilt. It will show you from a distance things you might not notice up front, up close. And so I noticed that those were the same fabrics. So I just used my seam ripper and took out this block and replaced it with different fabrics. And I've hand sewn it on one side. I pinned it down and quilted over it to hold it in place. And when I do the binding, I'll come along with tiny invisible stitches and finish sewing it down. but I think it looks great. I'm very tickled with the fabric I used. Remember, that was Sweet Prairie by Riley Blake. And then the pattern was by Faith Jones of Fresh Lemon Quilts, and it is on the weallsew.com site by Bernina. And it's free, so go check it out and make one for yourself. I thought, before I post this, why don't I tell you a little bit about how I do the binding? You know that I sewed it on the frame, and then I use these hairpins. They're inexpensive. I can get them from Walmart or a hair supply company. And I just clip them on like that. No more putting pins that stick you. I do what's called a slip stitch. And it's not a running stitch because it's hidden. You can get it in real close. Alright, and I've got an applique pin. I've got an applique pin. I like John James, and I like the coated pins because they go through so much easier. And I've got a gray thread because my binding changes color so often. I figured I would just use a gray thread. It'll match anything. Gray is my favorite color anyway because it just blends in instead of standing out. So what I do is it's through the top edge of the binding right here. Can you see that? Okay. And so now I go straight down, and then I run the needle in between the top and bottom layer of the quilt and come up about 1/4 of an inch away, just grabbing a little bite of the binding fabric. See that? Just a little bite. And then I pull it up, and I go straight back down in that same area, run in between the layers, and come right up through the very edge of that, and just keep doing this all the way around. Now, I've been doing hand sewing for many years, so I'm really tickled, but I mean I should be at this point, how that no real stitches show. Sometimes you can see a dimple where it was, but you don't see the stitches. And so it takes a while. People think, oh, it couldn't take any time to sew a binding on, but it takes me a good number of hours. So here, yeah, just run it. Make sure you don't come through the other side, but I kind of liken it to a fish popping up, getting a little bit of air, going straight back down, swimming under the water. Maybe not a fish. How about a diver? Okay, we'll have a snorkeler. He comes, he goes under the water, pops up, gets a breath of air, goes right back down, swims underwater some more. So that's how I do these stitches. So, let me back out. Here is the bound quilt. So that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. Come back and do a Jenny Buyer or a strawberry quilt with me. Look for those. Thank you and have a great week. Bye-bye.